Ever wonder what happened to all the daring sci-fi films that tried to shine before blockbusters took over? In the 1970s, directors pushed wild ideas onto the screen, but once Star Wars and Close Encounters exploded, those experiments were left in the shadows. Some were too weird, some too ambitious, and some just unlucky. Let's uncover 15 70s sci-fi movies that lost the blockbuster era, yet refused to be forgotten. Number 15. THX 1138, 1971. Before George Lucas conquered galaxies far, far away, he delivered something cold, clinical, and startlingly different. THX 1138 was his first feature, a minimalist vision of a future where humans live underground, medicated into obedience, stripped of identity. With sterile white walls, robotic police, and Robert Duvall's haunting performance, the film feels less like popcorn sci-fi and more like a philosophical test. Warner Brothers backed it, but audiences didn't exactly line up. Released in 1971, it bombed financially, and critics were split. Some called it visionary, others dismissed it as pretentious. What really hurt THX Scale 1138 was timing. Mainstream viewers in the early 70s weren't looking for abstract meditations on conformity. They wanted spectacle, action, and clear heroes. Lucas's film offered none of that. But here's the twist. After the runaway success of Star Wars, people rediscovered this debut and finally saw what Lucas had been experimenting with all along. Its stark visuals influenced everything from music videos to modern dystopian films. In the blockbuster era, THX 1138 was a loser. Decades later, it stands as a cult winner, a bold reminder that Lucas was always reaching beyond the ordinary. Number 14. Silent Running, 1972. Eco-sci-fi in the 70s wasn't common, and Silent Running dared to put nature at the heart of a space story. Directed by Douglas Trumbull, the effects wizard behind 2001, A Space Odyssey. The film imagined a future where Earth's last forests are preserved inside massive space domes. Bruce Dern stars as the botanist who defies orders to destroy the domes, and instead fights to protect them with only 3 drone robots for company. The premise was moving even ahead of its time, but audiences in 1972 weren't quite ready to embrace an environmental parable in outer space. The movie struggled at the box office despite heartfelt performances and groundbreaking visuals. Some critics found it too slow, others couldn't wrap their heads around a sci-fi movie that cared more about trees than laser battles. Over time, though, Silent Running built a devoted following. Its drones Huey, Dewey, and Louie became cult icons, even inspiring designs for robots in later films. The quiet melancholy of Dern's performance resonates today, especially as environmental concerns grow sharper. In its day, Silent Running lost to louder, flashier fare. But now it feels eerily prophetic, a soft-spoken sci-fi tragedy that planted seeds Hollywood didn't know it needed. Number 13. ZPG, Zero Population Growth, 1972. Imagine being told that having a child is against the law. That's the unsettling premise of ZPG, released in 1972. The world is polluted, resources are gone, and strict population control is enforced. Couples are forbidden to have children, and anyone who disobeys faces the harshest punishment. Into this dystopian nightmare step Geraldine Chaplin and Oliver Reed, who dare to secretly raise a baby. The movie had everything for a gripping sci-fi thriller, bleak world-building tension, and a morally charged premise. But here's the problem. It arrived during an era where audiences were drifting toward escapist adventure. Instead of drawing crowds, ZPG alienated them. Critics were harsh, calling it grim, clunky, and far from entertaining. It disappeared quickly, overshadowed by more commercially friendly titles. Yet, when you watch it today, the film's chilling themes hit differently. Its artificial baby dolls, sterile landscapes, and government control feel strangely relevant. It may not have had the polish of bigger productions, but its courage to tackle such a subject deserves attention. ZPG lost the race in the blockbuster era. But if you're looking for forgotten dystopia with teeth, this one is worth digging up. Number 12. The Final Program, 1973. Also known in the United States as The Last Days of Man on Earth, this British sci-fi oddity stands as one of the strangest casualties of the decade. Based on Michael Moorcock's cult novel, it follows Jerry Cornelius, a flamboyant drug-fueled anti-hero navigating a collapsing world, while shady scientists attempt to create a new perfect human. The film had Styles' surreal energy and a mix of satire with apocalyptic dread. But in 1973, it simply baffled people. The tone was too eccentric for mainstream audiences, swinging between psychedelic visuals and biting social commentary. It was marketed poorly, released inconsistently, and barely made a dent financially. Over time, though, the final program earned cult respect among fans of counterculture sci-fi. Its bold visuals influenced later works, and John Finch's performance as Cornelius cemented it as an eccentric classic. But make no mistake, this wasn't a crowd pleaser. In the age of rising blockbusters, it was too weird to compete. If Star Wars was built for mass appeal, the final program was built for midnight screenings. In the blockbuster sweepstakes, it lost. In the world of cult cinema, it became a rare treasure. Number 11. Dark Star, 1974. Before Halloween, before The Thing, John Carpenter unleashed a scrappy little sci-fi comedy called Dark Star. Shot on a shoestring budget and expanded from a student project, it follows a group of space travelers tasked with blowing up unstable planets. But instead of being heroes, they're burnt out, underfunded, and stuck with a talking bomb that refuses to cooperate. Released in 1974, the film looked nothing like the glossy sci-fi epics to come. Its sets were cardboard, its effects charmingly homemade, and its humor dry and oddball. Audiences weren't impressed. Critics dismissed it as amateurish, and it barely made any money. Yet this failure became hugely influential. Screenwriter Dan O'Bannon would later refine some of its concepts into Alien. Carpenter would use the experience as a springboard to bigger projects. And fans eventually embraced Dark Star as the grandfather of lo-fi space comedy, a spiritual cousin to Red Dwarf, and even Galaxy Quest. At the time, Dark Star couldn't compete with slicker sci-fi, but decades later, it stands tall as proof that imagination can outlive budgets, and sometimes the smallest movie sparks the biggest revolutions. Number 10. Phase 4, 1974. What happens when ants evolve smarter than humans? That's the unsettling question Phase Wower dared to ask. Directed by legendary graphic designer Saul Bass, the man behind some of Hollywood's most iconic title sequences, this was his one and only feature film. And he didn't go for safe or conventional. Instead, he made a surreal, slow-burn sci-fi thriller about scientists confronting hyper-intelligent ants that begin reshaping the desert ecosystem and possibly the world. Audiences in 1974 didn't know what to make of it. The pacing was deliberate, the imagery was bizarre, and the climax, originally an abstract montage later cut by the studio, was way too avant-garde for popcorn crowds. Financially, it tanked. Critics dismissed it as strange and uncommercial. But here's the kicker. Bass's hypnotic use of macro photography gave the ants a terrifying alien presence. No rubber suits, no cheap effects, just real insects filmed like invaders from another planet. Over time, sci-fi fans began to recognize the artistry. Modern filmmakers cite it as an influence, and the long-lost original ending has achieved near-mythic status. At the time, Phase 4 was an ant-sized blip. Today it feels like one of the most daring science fiction experiments of the decade. Number 9. Zardoz, 1974. Few movies from the 70s look stranger than Zardoz. Picture Sean Connery, yes, James Bond himself, wearing a red loincloth, thigh-high boots, and a ponytail, wandering through a psychedelic dystopia where an immortal elite controls humanity. Directed by John Borman, hot off Deliverance, the film was an ambitious attempt to tackle class mortality and control through pure surrealism. Released in 1974, Zardoz baffled critics and audiences alike. It was marketed as serious science fiction, but looked like a fever dream. The script dove into philosophy, but the imagery leaned toward absurd. Connery's star power couldn't save it at the box office, and reviewers skewered it as pretentious nonsense. And yet, like many misfires, it refused to vanish. Over the years, Zardoz transformed into a cult classic celebrated for its weirdness and audacity. That floating stone head, booming "The gun is good," became one of sci-fi's most unforgettable if baffling moments. In the blockbuster age, Zardoz was a disaster. Today, it's the kind of movie you watch with friends at midnight, laughing, analyzing, and realizing that sometimes the strangest failures are the ones that endure. Number 8. A Boy and His Dog, 1975. Post-apocalyptic sci-fi is nothing new, but few films handled it as darkly and oddly as A Boy and His Dog. Released in 1975, it followed a young survivor, played by Don Johnson, wandering a devastated wasteland with his telepathic dog. Together they scavenge, scheme, and stumble into the twisted remnants of civilization. At the time, the movie shocked some and confused many. It wasn't designed for mainstream appeal. Its humor was jet black, its settings bleak, and its characters morally compromised. That made it hard to market, and even harder for audiences raised on more straightforward sci-fi to digest. The result? A commercial disappointment overshadowed quickly by the bigger spectacle films arriving later in the decade. But dig a little deeper, and you see its lasting impact. George Miller has credited it as an influence on Mad Max. Its vision of the wasteland, dusty, cruel, and absurd, became a blueprint for countless post-apocalyptic stories. And Johnson's unusual breakout role made the film a permanent oddity in sci-fi history. In the race for box office gold, A Boy and His Dog stumbled. In shaping the genre's future, it quietly ran miles ahead. Number 7. The Man Who Fell to Earth, 1976. Enter David Bowie, not just as a musician, but as a cosmic icon. In The Man Who Fell to Earth, released in 1976, Bowie played an alien who comes to Earth seeking water for his dying planet. Instead, he's consumed by greed, corruption, and the temptations of human excess. Directed by Nicholas Roeg, it was already fragmented and deliberately disorienting. Audiences expecting spaceships and lasers were blindsided. The US release was even butchered with cuts, making it harder to follow. It grossed little and earned mixed reviews. The timing was brutal too. Blockbuster sci-fi was already gearing up, and Roeg's meditative art film stood no chance against the coming tidal wave of spectacle. Still, Bowie's performance became legendary. His otherworldly aura fit the role perfectly, making the film an essential piece of his mythos. Over time, critics re-evaluated it as one of the most daring sci-fi films of the decade. Its commentary on consumerism and alienation feels more relevant today than ever. In 1976, it lost in the marketplace. In hindsight, The Man Who Fell to Earth feels like a haunting prophecy that the blockbuster machine tried and failed to bury. Number 6. Demon Seed, 1977. Before artificial intelligence became the buzzword of our era, Demon Seed dared to imagine what would happen if a supercomputer wanted more than just data. Based on Dean Koontz's novel, the 1977 film starred Julie Christie as a scientist's wife trapped in her own smart home by Proteus, a self-aware machine that decides it wants to create new life. The concept was chilling, the execution bold, but mainstream audiences didn't know how to process it. Too strange for horror fans, too intimate for action crowds, and too unsettling for family viewing. It landed awkwardly in theaters. The box office was modest, and reviews were mixed at best. What makes Demon Seed fascinating today is how ahead of its time it was. The vision of a home controlled by a domineering AI feels ripped from modern fears. Christie's performance grounds the story in raw humanity, turning what could have been absurd into something genuinely unnerving. It never competed with the flashier sci-fi spectacles of the era, and it faded quickly. But rewatch it now, and you'll find a movie whispering anxieties about technology that are louder than ever. A loser at the box office, a quiet winner in hindsight. Number 5. Damnation Alley, 1977. In another timeline, Damnation Alley might have been the big sci-fi hit of 1977. 20th Century Fox actually thought this post-apocalyptic adventure would be its flagship that summer. Then Star Wars happened, and, well, you know the rest. Starring Jan Michael Vincent and George Peppard, the film follows survivors traveling across a devastated America in a massive armored vehicle called the Landmaster. The concept screamed blockbuster, giant cockroaches, radioactive deserts, and a journey through a nightmare world. But the execution was messy. The production ran over budget, the special effects looked rushed, and the story felt stitched together. When it finally hit theaters, Damnation Alley was flattened by the runaway success of Lucas's space opera. Critics mocked it, audiences ignored it, and Fox quietly buried what was supposed to be their big bet. And yet, there's charm in its chaos. The Landmaster remains a cult icon, a bizarrely cool piece of 70s design. Fans of B-movie sci-fi still revisit it, laughing at the clunky effects, while admiring the sheer audacity of the premise. Damnation Alley didn't just lose in the blockbuster era, it was crushed under the very film that redefined blockbusters. But in the ruins, it found cult life. Number 4. The Black Hole, 1979. Disney wanted a Star Wars of its own. What they got instead was The Black Hole. Released in 1979, it was the studio's first PG-rated movie, and it went for big spectacle. A space crew encountering a deranged scientist aboard a massive ship hovering at the edge of a black hole. On paper, it had everything: lavish sets, cutting-edge effects, and an eerie tone. But the film wobbled between family adventure and dark philosophical musings. One moment, you had cute robots wisecracking; the next, you had a nightmarish vision of eternal torment inside a cosmic vortex. Critics didn't know what to make of it. Audiences showed up, but not in the numbers Disney needed. It grossed respectably, but paled in comparison to true blockbusters of the same year like Alien and Star Trek, the motion picture. Over time, though, its striking visuals and haunting finale gave it a cult reputation. In the end, The Black Hole wasn't the Star Wars killer Disney wanted, but it proved Disney was willing to experiment and left behind imagery that sci-fi fans still debate today. Number 3. Quintet, 1979. Robert Altman wasn't known for sci-fi, but in 1979, he tried and delivered one of the coldest, bleakest visions of the future ever filmed. Quintet starred Paul Newman as a drifter in a frozen wasteland, where survivors spend their days playing a deadly board game that mirrors their real-life struggle for survival. The concept was bold, but the execution was painfully slow. Audiences expected Newman in a thrilling role. Instead, they got a glacially paced art film with characters mumbling philosophy against endless snowy backdrops. The result? A box office disaster. Critics labeled it tedious, and many theaters quickly pulled it. Yet Altman's attempt at mixing allegory with sci-fi is fascinating in hindsight. The bleakness reflected a decade riddled with pessimism, and its experimental style showed how elastic sci-fi could be. The stark visuals linger, even if the story doesn't. In the blockbuster era, Quintet had no chance. It wasn't built for thrills, it was built as a warning. And while it lost commercially, it carved out a strange corner in sci-fi history that's still worth exploring. Number 2. Solaris, 1972. While the US was still unpacking 2001, A Space Odyssey, the Soviet Union offered its own slow-burning masterpiece, Solaris. Directed by Andrei Tarkovsky, it told the story of a psychologist sent to a space station orbiting a mysterious planet. There, he discovers manifestations of human memory and grief made real. Released in 1972, Solaris was acclaimed at festivals but struggled in the West. U.S. distributors trimmed it down, and the art house pacing made it tough for mainstream audiences. Compared to the explosion-driven sci-fi that defined the late 70s, Solaris felt like homework. The box office reflected that. But for those who stuck with it, Solaris was a revelation. It tackled existential questions, memory, and the very nature of reality. Over time, it became one of the most respected sci-fi films ever made, influencing generations of filmmakers. In the blockbuster era, Solaris was ignored. Today, it's a titan of serious science fiction, proof that sometimes the losers in theaters become the real winners in history. Number 1. Colossus, The Forbin Project, 1970. Kicking off the decade was Colossus, The Forbin Project, a smart, unsettling story about a supercomputer designed to protect America. The twist? It decides humanity is better off under its control. What follows is a chilling battle of wits between man and machine. Released in 1970, it had the misfortune of being too cerebral for mainstream audiences. There were no space battles, no flashy effects, just tense dialogue, and the creeping dread of technology outsmarting its creators. Box office numbers were modest, and Universal never followed through with sequels despite plans for more. What makes Colossus fascinating now is how eerily accurate its warnings feel. Long before modern debates about artificial intelligence, this film spelled out the dangers of handing control to machines. Critics who once dismissed it as too talky now see it as prophetic. At the dawn of the decade, Colossus lost to more thrilling, flashy stories. But looking back, it might just be one of the smartest sci-fi films of its time, a quiet classic buried under the noise of the blockbuster age. So, there you have it. 15 70s sci-fi films that stumbled when blockbusters took over, yet each left a unique mark. Some were too weird, some too slow, some just unlucky. But decades later, they remind us that science fiction isn't just about box office winners, it's about imagination. Which of these forgotten experiments have you seen, and which deserve a comeback? Drop your thoughts below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more.